Hey guys, good evening everyone to today's introduction webinar on introduction to blockchain. So I am Nishant, and I head technology and technological products at Zubi. We at Zubi are building a one of a kind ecosystem. It's an inclusive ecosystem where millennials can learn and assess themselves in emerging technologies, namely blockchain, machine learning, AI, IoT, and explore various opportunities pertaining to the same in a more streamlined fashion. I've personally been involved in the blockchain industry since I graduated from my college, and I'm mostly going to share my key takeaways from my career trajectory and exposure to the blockchain industry. So let's dive right in. Uh, just wait. All right. So if we talk about the most groundbreaking inventions in history, they mostly filled a gap. Talking about the first gap, it's the knowledge gap. The high class people owned and controlled information comes press, and it makes cheap and correct information available to all. Second is the power gap. For every small work in the past which needed manual or any kind of work, bam, we had engines and people could travel places, transport huge masses across continents without needing horses or even men working as slaves. Now that the people could trade more easily, communication became really important. So we then had internet, and we know how it is solving our lives every single day, especially during our lockdown times. Even today's webinar, we are utilizing internet for the same. So what does blockchain really solve? It solves trust. All right. Trust between individuals, institutions, businesses. If we talk about the major businesses of the world, even today, it relies mostly on spoken word. If we talk about the top industries of the world, namely the supply chain industry or the banking industry mostly relies on paper trails. They don't really trust anyone. But if we talk about the supply chain industry, which is a very huge industry in itself, it relies mostly on spoken word, mostly between the travelers and the businessmen. Uh, Talking about the industry size, trust in various forms contributes to a market size of $100 trillion today. This number is only going to get bigger from here on. So, what exactly is blockchain and how does it really solve the trust gap? Going ahead, blockchain is an immutable distributed ledger. Uh, if you look at the diagram that I have shown on the slide, it's actually, in its most literal sense, it is multiple blocks which are linked to each other by chains. All right. So if anywhere on the internet you are looking for a meaning of blockchain, these are the three words that come to you all the time. It's immutable distributed ledger. So what do these words really mean? So immutable means tamper proof. Distributed means that the records that are stored on blockchain do not really depend on any central sources of truth. For example, if we take an example of Google or Facebook, all the information that you are looking at, mostly when you are doing any search on the internet, it's mostly because of the sources of truth provided to you by Google or Facebook. All right. Which means that it is practically impossible having a situation for a single point of failure in systems which are distributed. If we talk about the Googles or Facebooks of the world, they have multiple data centers all around the world so that they can ensure that backups are there. But what if all 4 data centers of Google go down? All right. So a distributed system basically handles a single point of failure. Third word is ledger. Well, if you guys are familiar with your bank statements, with credit debit statements, that's what a ledger exactly is. All right. This means everything we do on the blockchain networks of today are in fact transactions. So blockchain works on a peer-to-peer network. If you look at the two diagrams I've showed on the screen, on the left-hand side is the traditional networks. For engineers, I believe you would have learned about this in your network topology. So on the left side, you see a traditional networking system, and on the right-hand side, it's blockchain, which is more of a peer-to-peer network. So what's really a distributed network? Let me take an example. Let's imagine that everyone attending today's webinar, we decide to create a network. All right. So every word I speak, all of us write it down in our diaries, or well, maybe all of us all of us record this video on all our personal machines. So at the end of today's webinar, all of us have the same recording, and we do not have to depend on YouTube's recording of today's webinar, even if it is accidentally deleted. All right. Also, let's say at any point, God forbid, I say incorrect information, then all the attendees, while processing the webinar, can point it out to me later. that at XYZ amount of time, at ABC time, you have like shared an incorrect information. So I cannot even deny the fact later on by just editing the YouTube video, as everyone has their own sources of truth. Now, in this scenario, I'm definitely a broadcaster of information. In a truly decentralized network, all of us have an equal say in broadcasting information. Talking about the characteristics of blockchain, first is replication. So all of you are replicating the information that I am sharing with you. Taking an example of today's webinar only. Let's say you have a friend who could not join today's webinar. You can share your personal recording with them. Also, they can verify whether it is the same recording from his other peers who may have joined today's session. So everybody basically syncs information. So that's what replication means. Secondly, no central authority. Like I said, everybody only believes in information that they have on their local machine. We know how anal banks are when it comes to depending on information from other banks. So like they don't even use the internet, rather than own intranet for processing data entries that happen in their banks. So no central authority basically means that you're not depending on anyone else for your own source of truth. Third is irreversibility. All sources of information is like an arrow shot from a bow. You cannot take it back. Information stays till eternity. Accessibility, it's pretty intuitive. Taking our standard example of webinar recording. Now you don't have to depend on internet connection or YouTube to access that information later. Let's say you record today's webinar. At any point in time, you can just take out your cell phone or your laptop or whatever device you are viewing today's webinar in. You will be able to access it. You do not need the internet. Let's say YouTube server goes down, you can access the information even without depending on YouTube for that. All right. Timestamping, I believe it's pretty intuitive. Timestamping every source of information. At what time did I take this webinar? At what point of time did I delve XYZ information? That's what timestamping is. And last but not the least, every single byte of information is encrypted. So there's no peeping Tom business like we have whenever Facebook or an academy or any other such company servers get hacked. All right, leave alone hacking. Phishing sites capture so much of our confidential data that we don't even know about. All right, so if we are able to encrypt that data, we know the importance of encryption of data. So blockchain in its inherent architecture solves that very problem. Industry use cases. All right, so coming to the use cases, blockchain finds a hell lot of use cases in a lot of industries. If I even start listing out 10% of those applications, we will not even be able to cover it all in today's session. So let's just discuss about some of those industries where blockchain finds its usage. Talking about blockchain application from a time saved perspective, all of us know what's the importance of time. All right, so here's an example of the blockchain Walmart application. So Walmart, if you guys know, it's a very huge retail store in the US. So most of their premium products are mostly things which are imported from countries all around the world. All right, and that's why they heavily depend on the supply chain industry. Let's say they claim that our apples have been imported from the Himalayas or something like that. So that adds a level of premium nature to all those products. Even in India, if you talk about Nature's Basket, so on the products they have written organically packed or organically maybe organically farmed or something like that. So those additional words like organic or maybe sourced from the best farms in Switzerland, something like that, all of them add a level of premiumness to any product. All right, so let's say I am a consumer at Walmart. I go to Walmart, I buy a premium product, and at a later date I find that this is in fact a fake. This is a product that I actually could have bought from the local market at a much lower price. So how do we really tackle misinformation? All right, so if we talk about early on, like even in any of the legacy based systems that work today, if we talk about the average amount of information in the supply chain industry, let's say I bought a tomato and I want to know whether this tomato is actually sourced from a particular country, and it went through the best standards when it came to me in throughout its journey. If we talk about legacy systems, since most of the supply chain industry is an unorganized industry and it mostly depends on paper trails or spoken words, just guess the amount of time it would take in order to fetch information about any of those products. Just make a random guess. You guys can type it out in the chat. how much time would it take in legacy systems? All right. I know that in the example I've shown how much will it be possible with implementation of blockchain. Right now, this is just a proof of concept. So if we talk about the live scenario, how much time does it really take? If anyone wants to answer. Uh, that's a very optimistic answer, Shekhar. So I'll just move ahead with the answer. So you guys are not going to believe it, but if you talk about the supply chain industry, it's so inefficient that even today, if we talk about most of the legacy implementations, recalling information about any particular batch on a particular day, its entire trajectory, its entire journey, in order to cover that, it on an average it takes around 2 months. All right. And with the blockchain implementation, Walmart was able to recall its own legacy implementation of a whole lot of mangoes in 2.2 seconds. This is something they had done in collaboration with IBM. So that's how blockchain saves time. Thinking about another example, Ohio State in the US, it allows the organization to pay taxes in crypto. Now, if you guys know about cryptocurrencies basically are peer-to-peer transfers. All right, so you don't really have to depend on bank transfer. So maybe banks may delay those transactions, but if you're doing a peer-to-peer transfer, most of that money belongs to you and you're directly transferring it to the state. Also, this is very beneficial if we talk about direct benefit transfer to any of the citizens. So that is also something that the US government is currently working around. Slovenia and Switzerland are creating blockchain nations. When I say blockchain nations, most of their government agencies, most of their offices, they are actually storing all that they were storing earlier in a paper trail. They tried to actually move it to a centralized system way early. But the thing is, in order to store such huge amounts of information, you need a huge hell lot of resources. All right. And if there are multiple parties involved which do not really trust each other, all right, let alone a centralized source of information. So everybody wants their own personal source of information. If we talk about banks, we have already discussed how anal they are about their own personal information and the privacy of those information. So when we move all those existing paper trail systems to blockchain, what we eventually do is everybody has their own source of satisfaction that yes, this information actually belongs to me. I'm actually a part of the information dissemination process, and it's also tamper proof. So a lot of countries, Slovenia and Switzerland, have their own first proof of concept of being a blockchain nations. Other countries are following, like Singapore, or maybe there's a country near the coast of Italy called Malta. They are trying to become blockchain nations. Visa launches its cross-border transaction solutions. So again, I'll not ask the same question to you guys. So if we talk about the legacy implementations of cross-border transactions, let's say I have to transfer $50 to my friend who is sitting in the US. All right. So how much time do you think it takes on an average for those cross-border transactions to take place? So the correct answer, if we talk about the pre 2005 era, so on an average, remittances usually it took around 15 days. All right. And then came a startup called Swift. They created a global payment interface, or the GPI, and that enabled people to transfer money to their friends in the US or maybe any country of the world within 4 days. All right. This is a real world scenario. All right. If you want a real perspective to it, if you have to send money to your friend from, if you have an account in SBI and you have to send money to your friend who has an account in HDFC Bank, and you're trying to do that through NEFT on a weekend, all right, it will take at least 3 days. Why? Because there's 3 parties involved here now. There's SBI, there's HDFC, and there's the RBI, because it is an interbank transfer. Now, this tends to become way more complicated when we talk about cross-border transactions, because like we have RBI here, there's a Federal Bank of America in the US, all right? So there's 2 federal banks involved, there's 2 corresponding banks involved, and since this is a cross currency transaction, basically there's multiple financial concepts called nostro or vostro accounts. Basically SBI will have to create an account in maybe the Federal Bank of America, or maybe the Central Bank of America, any bank in the US. All right, so on an average, this process used to take, in any legacy based system or even the cutting edge Swift GPI system. It on an average for the actual remittance to take place, mind you, actual remittance, not like the UPI transactions. The actual remittance, it takes somewhere between 4 to 5 days. All right, and the first implementation of a cross-border transaction on top of blockchain was built by this blockchain network called Ripple, and they were able to do cross-border transactions in under 4 seconds. Now that was also a proof of concept. That time period, it keeps on increasing. It's somewhere around 4 to 10 seconds right now. And how they were able to do is do the same is that they were able to create a consortium of banks all around the world. All right, and they were able to do transactions directly on blockchain. The transactions, as in the entries of all those transactions that were taking place in those banks. Talking about Indian states and organizations, these are some leading enterprises and governments which are investing heavily in blockchain. So we know things are mainstream when the Indian government actually starts implementing it. All right. So if you take an example of Telangana, they have created their own blockchain district. All right, so that they will be able to explore land records and database transfer on top of blockchain. All right. Similarly, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Maharashtra government, they are also trying to implement the same land registry pilot project, so that they are able to understand the implementations. Other than that, most of the banks, if we talk about any of the nationalized banks, in collaboration with the Reserve Bank of India, they are trying to create a blockchain based product called BankChain, which would eventually be a consortium of blockchain. To give you guys a perspective as to why this is necessary, you guys do UPI transactions. We know the pre-UPI era. We know how difficult it used to be transferring money to my friend on a weekend, or maybe at times when the banks were not open. Even after UPI was able to solve so many problems in our lives, there's an upper limit. If you guys have noticed, most of the UPI applications, they have an upper limit of 1 lakh worth of transfers in an entire day. Why did they have to add that? Is because the transactions that are maintained by UPI are not actually maintained by the banks themselves. All right, and if we take the example of Google Pay, the data transactions are being handled by Google. If we talk about the Bheem app, the data is handled by Infosys. So banks don't really trust these third-party companies, third-party institutions for their own transfers, and that's why the RBI has placed an upper cap on the same. So the NPCI, which is the governing body of the UPI apps, all right, they have in fact started their own POC implementations on top of blockchain, and it is called Vajra. All right, so with Vajra, one of the best implementations that will be possible is that obviously we will be able to see transfers of more than 1 lakh amount possible between peers. All right, and that will be something. All right, so that is how blockchain is trying to come into our mainstream applications. Talking about industries, IRDBT, the tech arm of RBC, they led 2 POCs by involving banks and technology firms like IBM and Infosys. Infosys, we already know the Bheem app. They are trying to create a micro payment system through blockchain. Insurance companies, tracking of health insurance policies using blockchain. If you talk about the drug counterfeiting use cases, any of the medical use cases in the world right now, especially after the GDPR compliance that has been projected by the European Union, these things find their direct implementation in any decentralized application, be it blockchain, be it non-blockchain. So that's why blockchain is becoming a first choice of any of the general insurance companies in order to track health insurance policies. Why? Because if you guys know, most of health insurance policies, they even today, they mostly depend on paper trails. So if you take an example of Max Bupa, you go to Max Bupa's website, and then you upload all your information. So you think that that's how it really happens? No, there's actually a form. They make a manual data entry in their own systems through those forms, and it's a very hassle full process. All right, if we talk about the KYC processes, you have an account in SBI, you have an account in HDFC, you want to buy a credit card, you have to go through 3 separate KYC processes. All right, so any technology in the world, any system in the world, existing system in the world, where a lot of paper trail is involved, blockchain finds its direct implementation. Now a lot of you guys might actually question that why can't these things not be done on a centralized system? Well, if these things would have been possible on a centralized system, we would have had seen a complete implementation of the same by now, a mainstream implementation of the same. The reason why these paper trails don't find their application in any centralized system is because no one is given the monetary benefit. No one has the incentive to actually store tons and tons of data of third party organizations, that too with enabling data security at such low costs. All right, so when blockchain finds its implementation, most of the infrastructure costs, they will be borne by those companies themselves, not by any third party application. All right, and that brings in more trust because the companies are depending on their own information. Also, there is no third party dependency, obviously. The Andhra Pradesh government, they introduced blockchain land records. I have already discussed the same. These are some of the Indian companies. I'll not go in the details of these. These are some of the Indian companies at a broader level which are involved in blockchain products. There's a lot of companies actually. So yeah, these are some of the company logos where they have actually grouped themselves into multiple consortiums. And these are three broad classifications of three different blockchain networks of the world. There's multiple blockchain networks as well in the world. Coming to Ethereum and smart contracts. So like I said, there's n different blockchain networks of the world. All right, there's Bitcoin, there's Ripple, there's Ethereum. So what exactly are these different blockchain networks and what are they exactly trying to solve? So if we take an example of the first blockchain network, which is Bitcoin, if you guys are following the crypto market closely, you know what Bitcoin is. It allows for peer-to-peer transfer of value. All right, so what Ethereum tries to do is, since the transfer of value is written in a piece of code, which is from one address to another address, what amount should be transferred in a cryptographic manner, preventing double spends. If we are able to transfer value by using a piece of code, all right. So what Ethereum is a system which allows you to, in fact, create applications, any of the real world applications in a decentralized fashion. All right, and what are smart contracts? I'll discuss that same. So Ethereum, it's Vitalik Buterin's child. If you know Vitalik Buterin, he is 26 years of age and his net worth while compiling this particular presentation was $100 million. So at such a young age, how was he able to come to a net worth of $100 million? So Vitalik Buterin was an early employee at Bitcoin.org, which was a decentralized organization maintaining the Bitcoin network. Obviously, it is not a company. It's mostly run by the community. So we can call Vitalik as a community member. So he asked a very simple question, that if we are able to transfer value like money, basically Bitcoins, using a piece of code, why not any of the applications in the world? And in order to give those applications a name, he called them smart contracts. Smart contracts was essentially a very old term which was used to denote any piece of application which is able to replicate real world contracts. All right, so when Vitalik created Ethereum, when he had the idea of Ethereum, he said that all those decentralized applications that will be running on top of the Ethereum network, we will call them smart contracts. All right, what are the advantages of smart contracts? They are resistant to censorship, they run on a distributed server. All right, and Ethereum, like Bitcoin, has its own native assets which is called Ether, which is the basis of value in the Ethereum ecosystem. What is a smart contract? Like we discussed, these are applications which are executed by a decentralized network. That means if we talk about any real world game, let's say PUBG, let's say one day PUBG's servers go down. All right, that means all your scores, all your high scores and all your statistics, it's all lost. All right, so if we are able to bring decentralized gaming into mainstream in any mainstream scenario, those data losses will never happen. All right, so that is one of the use cases of being able to run games on top of blockchain. All right, so yes, network consensus, it removes the need for a trusted third party. Let's say I owe Rishabh some amount of money, so I create a contract and every community member will be able to see the contents of the contract, that I owe Rishabh an amount of $100 if he delivers certain services to me. All right, so at a later date, if I tell Rishabh that I don't really know the details of that contract, this is a real world scenario. If the paper contract, it is lost, then I'm not really liable to pay Rishabh any amount. So let's say we write it down in a piece of smart contract that I owe Rishabh an amount of $100. So at a later date, if I don't pay him that amount, he can take that smart contract and go to the community members, and he can claim his rightful share of money. All right, so that is what smart contracts will enable us to do in the future. So violation of contracts, it requires subverting the entire network. Basically, Rishabh has to go against the entire network. If we talk about the population of the network today, so there's an average of 50,000 main nodes on the Ethereum network, along with 1 lakh other lightweight nodes. All right, nodes basically refers to the members of any network, like you and I. If we join the webinar network that we were talking about earlier on this in this webinar, so we are all nodes of the webinar network. So similarly, if we write the smart contract on the Ethereum network, so Rishabh can actually go to those 50,000 nodes in order to claim his payment which is due. All right, and that brings in a decentralized governance system. All right, so we know how community can handle governance. We can obviously depend more on the community than any centralized party, because Rishabh can eventually go to those centralized party, pay them some money on the side, and he will be able to save. So basically, I can do that. Sorry, my apologies. I can go and pay some registrar maybe $5 and tell him to just remove that smart contract, or maybe add some terms and conditions, so that I am not liable to pay Rishabh that particular amount. The same can't happen on a decentralized governance system. All right, so this is what a smart contract is. Contracts in Ethereum are like autonomous agents that live inside of Ethereum network. All right, so they have direct control over everything. So if you talk about housing loans, if we talk about most of the mainstream implementations, they run through this system of authority called escrows. All right, so banks hold funds for any house, any particular property, and if the seller transfers the house papers to the buyer, then the bank is liable to pay that amount of money. So in this particular system, we are trusting. I have already discussed blockchain is solving trust. All right, so we are depending on the bank to pay the escrow amount. So if we take about some of the dishonest banks of the world, if we talk about Yes Bank or PNB Bank, if we take an example of the Indian scenario, so if Yes Bank or PNB Bank would have gone bankrupt, so they would not have been able to pay that escrow amount. So what would have essentially happened is that whoever was the seller, he would have been at loss. Why? Because he would have essentially transferred his bank papers, and the bank would have gone bankrupt, and this particular individual, the buyer, he has the land records without paying any amount of money. So that is how the housing crisis actually happened in 2008 in the US. All right, they trusted the people that they will be eventually pay their house loans, but they did not, and that's why the banking system crashed in the US in 2008, and that brought recession to us as well in 2008. So this is what a smart contract is briefly. Now applications, some cool applications. Let's not talk about the financial aspects of it, because we already discussed some of those. Let's talk about the cool applications. The identity management system, like the hassles of KYC that we discussed, or maybe an identity management, maybe a cool avatar that you want to create, a decentralized user identity avatar. I have an identity, let's say Nishant underscore something XYZ. All right, that is my user profile that holds some currency, and everybody is able to see my currency. All right, and I can use that currency to maybe buy products on the decentralized internet, or maybe I'm able to auction properties on the internet. I'm able to purchase in-game services, value-added services through those currencies. I can even gain those currency by performing certain community activities. All right, so that is what an identity management system will be able to do. Decentralized file storage. All of us know that the pace at which files sizes are increasing. If I have a 1 TB hard disk, let's say I have a 1 TB hard disk and I don't use 500 GB of it. All right, so is there a system through which we can actually monetize people who have those unused spaces? Maybe I rent out the rest of the 500 GB worth of space to someone who is running his system on maybe 200 odd storage space on his hard disk, or maybe SSD. All right, so is there a system through which we can create a decentralized file storage system? Now, a lot of you might argue that there's obviously Google Cloud, but again, that depends on a centralized single point of failure. So if you are able to create a decentralized file storage system like the torrents of the world, the BitTorrents of the world, how they have created a decentralized file storage system, we all know that, how we download I'm not promoting or endorsing torrents, but yes, we know how torrents work and how even if I shut down my torrent server one day, the users are not affected because there's 10,000 different users who will be providing the same source of information. So that is what a decentralized file storage will be able to do in the future. All right, the same applies to any of the websites also. So basically, if information comes in a decentralized manner, there is no single point of information. That means all the websites of the world, they are like hack proof, if we talk about on a layman level. All right, third is the reputation systems. We talked about insurances. So since every transaction that a particular individual would have essentially created would be resting on an immutable, never ending database, all right, we will be able to create a unified reputation system. On the basis of that, we will be able to pass loans to him, that individual. We will be able to figure out his criminal records, which he can never get erased, even if he has high connects in the Supreme Court or even the government. All right. And fourth and most importantly, decentralized games. Maybe I want to share my hardware other than the hard disk space. I want to share my RAM space as well, so that people who are trying to run PUBG on their low end machines, they are able to benefit out of it. All right. A similar thing was tried by Google in a centralized manner, which was called Stadia. But again, that has a very huge dependency on Google. All right. So what decentralized gaming essentially means is that the community enables this. Not We should not be depending on any like tech giant of the world. All right. The community should be able to handle this. Talking about industry demands, if we talk about pure numbers, an increase from $1.2 billion in 2018 to 23.3 billion in 2023. This is the projection for the industry side, for the industry size, for fraud control, security, transparency, middleman fees, and reduced hacking threat is. All right. So this is like a projection of the industry size. So obviously, if there's such a huge projection of the industry size, there's a huge demand in the job market as well. So if we talk about the 2020 trends, so there's been a keen interest from federal governments. Even the Indian government has been actively involved and extremely vocal about the blockchain and crypto space. The RBI on the 9th of March, they actually lifted a ban very around two or 3 days back. They actually talked about cryptocurrencies in more details. A lot of cryptocurrency startups actually found a huge boom, and they were able to raise a lot of money because of the same. So yes, so the survivors of 2017-2018 crypto recession, they will be the most effective crowdfunded startups. If we talk about the VC funded startups of the world, so in 2017, a lot of people saw a very exciting new trend, all right, which was crowdfunding, which was earlier also possible, but again, it was possible at a much lower scale. But if we talk about the 2017 trends, there were so many companies who were able to raise huge amounts of money by crowdfunding, by doing ICOs or initial coin offerings on top of the Ethereum blockchain network. All right, so these are the trends. So obviously, if we talk about such huge industry sizes, there will be a huge demand of blockchain experts in the future. Talking about numbers, 30,000 new jobs will be created in India. Currently, there's only 6,500 qualified blockchain developers. That too, if we talk about the senior blockchain developers, the number will be less than maybe a quarter of this. All right, these are mostly people who know blockchain at a surface level. All right, so there's a very huge demand of people who understand blockchain, and there's not enough supply. All right, some top blockchain professional jobs in the world: blockchain developer, Ethereum developer, blockchain architect, Hyperledger developer, or Solidity developer. Obviously, I'm not sure, we have not discussed most of these points in today's session, but these are some of the job profiles. Other than these, there's a lot of other blockchain expert job that is available in the industry right now, and it's the numbers and the demands are actually growing by the day. All right. Now, how to become an Ethereum developer? Why I'm taking an example of Ethereum per se is because Ethereum, most of the blockchain networks of the world, because of the robust and modular nature of Ethereum, they actually borrow certain technologies and certain libraries from Ethereum. And because of the huge community that were actually instrumental in the Ethereum development community, because of the same, a lot of blockchain networks of the world, they want to actually engage the same community, because it's no use reinventing the wheel. So what they are doing is they are creating their blockchain networks which is in compliance, which is in direct compliance with the Ethereum network. So if you are able to run a piece of code on top of the Ethereum network, you will be able to run that same piece of code on most of the networks of the world. So that is why it's very essentially becoming an Ethereum / blockchain developer. All right, how to become one? Some popular languages of the world, JavaScript and Python. There's also a huge demand in Java developers, a growing interest in the Java developers as well. But JavaScript and Python developer community find a very huge increase and a very huge direct connect with the Ethereum developer community. Two languages for smart contracts: one is Solidity, one is Vyper. Solidity, it derives most of its syntax from JavaScript. So people who are JavaScript developers, they will be able to be Solidity developers more easily. They'll find an easy transition. Similarly, Vyper, which is the second language to build smart contracts on top of Ethereum, derives most of its syntax from Python. Now, why did they do it? Because they wanted to engage the JavaScript and Python community. All right. Other than that, Ethereum concepts, the basics of blockchain, the basics of the Ethereum architecture, what consensus is, what kind of consensus algorithm does Ethereum deploy, and things like these. All right. Some libraries that people need to know about: Web3.js, Web3.py. Web3.js is for JavaScript developers, Web3.py is for Python developers. Just like in machine learning, if you guys know, there's TensorFlow, there's Keras, there's PyTorch, and so many examples. Similarly, in the blockchain community, there's libraries like Web3.js and Web3.py. All right. Other than that, some other frameworks which run in parallel to the blockchain community, to these blockchain networks. One is IPFS, which is an interplanetary file system, so that you don't have to store files on blockchain, because transactions on blockchain actually cost you money. All right, and that's why IPFS could be a very easy decentralized manner in which you could store files. Truffle is similar to how you have a Git system in any of the real world coding languages. Similarly, while deploying any smart contract on any network, it involves 10 different steps. All right, so every time if you have to deploy a code, you would not want to do all of those. So consider Truffle as a CI/CD pipeline for most of your smart contract deployments. All right, so these are some of the things that are important in order to become a blockchain developer. How can I build apps? All right, some of the common platforms, I already discussed about Ethereum. There's other networks like the Hyperledger network or the Quorum network or the EOS network, the R3 Corda network, and a lot of other networks. So for people who want to create a decentralized identity through IoT devices, there's a very interesting blockchain network in the world called IOTA. Other than that, R3 Corda, Quorum, Ethereum, most of their smart contracts are share the same syntax. So if you know how to code on Ethereum, you will be able to mostly understand the basic concepts of most other blockchain networks of the world, and you will be able to differentiate between the different blockchain networks of the world and their different use cases and their different USPs. All right, so these are some of the common platforms of the world. All right, that's it from my side. As far as the explanation goes, I'll be taking some live comments. So starting with the comments, taking a simple example of blockchain, Vasu Bodipalli has asked. A simple example of blockchain, like I mentioned earlier.
Nishant, just I just
yeah, sure.
Nishant, people, we are going to start the Q&A session. If you have any questions in your mind, kindly type on the comment section, so the live chat, so that Nishant can answer those. Also, one more thing, Nishant has some surprises for you, and he's going to share the surprise to you at the end of the session. So keep tuned with us with the session. And I'm request. Can I have some questions now with people? Okay, so Nishant, you can ask this one, and after that, the people will start commenting over here.
All right, sure. So Sahib Gowda Patel has asked a question. Hello, sir. Anyone examples of blockchain implementation? It affects our organization. Sahib, could you be more specific? I'm not able to get you. I'm assuming this is what you have asked. One example of blockchain implementation. So I have taken an example of 10 different blockchain implementations already. All right, taking a simple example, there's a game called CryptoKitties. All right, if you are into gaming and everything. So there's a very popular game called CryptoKitties, wherein you buy cats, you grow cats, and then you breed more cats, and then you sell them on the Ethereum market. You will be able to gain ethers through the same. That is one game. talking about some serious blockchain implementations which affects Sahib, could you be more specific? Which organization are you talking about? Which broader organization are you talking about? I'll take an example of the medical industry. All right, the insurance claims. The insurance claims in so it's not very common in India, but most of the medications and the treatments that happen in the US, since the medical industry, and the healthcare industry is so expensive, there's no public healthcare system in the US, so they mostly depend on insurances. All right, so what happens is that insurance, they always have their own terms and conditions, so they don't allow every single new drug that is introduced in the market directly. They don't give them direct insurance coverages. So what do these drug have to do? There's this body called the FDA, Food and Drug Administration body in the US. They have to have an FDA approval. In order to get that, they have to show a real history. All right, maybe a history of, let's say, the past 2 years or 3 years, in which they were able to show that this particular drug is able to solve a particular problem, a particular illness. Let's take an example of corona, for example. Someone says that I have a drug which was able to solve corona. All right, and they have to get an immediate FDA approval. What will they have to do? The FDA will say that, do you have any historical proof? Obviously, if they have invented a corona vaccination today, all right, they don't have any history. So in order to get a direct FDA approval, they'll have to backdate some of their entries, all right, some of their drug entries. So what happens is that maybe these are drugs which are not actually tested, but there are so many fake backdated entries that are made in the system. So in a system like blockchain, where everything is timestamped and it is tamper proof, there is no way for anyone to go back in time and be able to change or backdate any of the entries. All right, so that is one very huge implementation in the insurance sector, because yes, we know what would happen if a false drug comes out in the market and says that it will be able to solve corona. Hope I was able to answer one of the questions. Vishal has a question: why is blockchain a trusted approach? Why is blockchain a trusted approach? Because of the 6 characteristics that I mentioned. One, it is distributed. All right, so you are not really trusting anyone else for the data, you are trusting yourself. So we as humans, we don't really trust third parties. All right, even if we trust banks, we have a little. If we talk about the PNB or the housing sector or any of these situations, we wouldn't trust banks with all our money, but we would trust ourselves, right? So a decentralized ecosystem basically means you are not trusting anyone else for your source of truth. You are trusting only yourself. That is one. Secondly, there's no single point of failure. So even if any of the websites go down, that does not mean that you lost all your data. That is very much possible in any of the top companies in the world. Even if we talk about Google, they have 4 data centers. They are trying to expand that to a lot of countries. All right, but let's say it's again a hypothetical scenario. I'm not telling that Google's data centers will be blown off. All right, take an example of a smaller company. All right, any XYZ company which has data centers maybe at 2 places in the country. All right, so if both of those servers go down, God forbid, both of those servers go down, then there's no point of backing up the information. But in a blockchain, since it's a distributed source of information, everybody is replicating the same piece of information. So there's no way that 50,000 different people, or maybe there's 7 billion people in the world, even if 100 million people start implementing things on blockchain, so there will be 100 million different points from which you can gain information. That is how it is trusted. Obviously, it is end-to-end encrypted, and that is why it adds an additional level of privacy. There's multiple blockchain implementations which enable you to hide your transactions from other people. So everybody has a case-to-case basis, but at a broader level, this is how blockchain solves trust. Hope I answered your question, Vishal. Rishabh, can we have the next question? Okay, Vishal has another question. Can blockchain be used outside the cryptocurrency field? The same example that I gave some minutes back about the drug counterfeit industry, the medical industry, that is just one of those use cases. The cross-border transactions. Cross-border transactions don't happen because of transfer of Bitcoins. All right, cross-border transaction happen because of if you talk about any of the databases of the world, if there is a medium through which you are able to transmit information directly in a decentralized manner. Why is decentralized manner important? Because there's no way a third party system will be able to create a system so secure which is able to handle all the banks and all their security systems. Because if they do so, they are taking a very huge it's a huge reputation thing for them. Because if they have created a security system, a secure system which they claim that no hacker of the world will be able to conquer, there obviously will be someone who will be eventually able to penetrate that system. So other than the cryptocurrency system, any transaction based system, any system wherein data is critical, if data is lost, all right, that means the system is lost. Supply chain industry, or the drug count, or the medicine industry, or the banking transactions, or maybe a system in which you don't want certain statistics to be deleted later or maybe backdated later. All those data critical systems, they find direct blockchain implementations. So hope I answered your question, Vishal. Next question, please. What's the difference between private blockchain network and a public one? Do private network have everything, meaning all the facilities as a public one? Obviously, so Sudhar, there's a trade-off between security and feasibility. All right. So public blockchain networks are the coolest things in the world. All right, a completely distributed, trustless system wherein any party of the world is able to verify transactions, and that brings in a level of decentralization. And higher the degree of decentralization of any system, the more secure that system is, obviously. Because if there are 50,000 nodes, that means there's 50,000 different backups of the same data. All right. In a private network, however, the number is less, the number of nodes is less. There's actually a control on top of those networks. Maybe there's a network called bank chain, which only allows banks to be members of that particular network, no real world user. All right, only banks, if they have to handle transactions. Now, why would they want to have a system like that? Because banks, they don't want to show all kinds of transactions to everyone. They want to privatize certain transactions. So private blockchain networks, they find their direct usage in any of the fintech industry. All right. But obviously that comes with its trade-off. The more you privatize the system, the lesser number of nodes that will be there resting on that particular system. And that's why the degree of decentralization decreases. So you have to find that constant balance between whether you want more security or more feasibility. Hope I answered your question, Sudhar. Rishabh, next question, please. Krishna, I just answered the question. The blockchain can be implemented in the healthcare domain. One is the insurance industry. There's multiple other use cases. The drug counterfeiting industry, that is a direct implementation of the supply chain industry. What happened throughout the journey of a particular drug? If you talk about aspirin, there's 100 different fake aspirins that are being sold in the Indian markets, and we don't really care. Who cares about tablets worth 1 or 2 rupees? All right, we don't really care that much. But is it good? If you talk about drug counterfeiting, it is so main scale that 1 in every 3 drug that we intake in any of the from any of the clinics, the best clinics of the world, they have counterfeit drugs. It's so mainstream. All right, so that is where blockchain will find its direct implementation. Why? Because no one will be able to have fraudulent paper trails for any of the drugs. They have to have those systems at the time when it was being created, and we know that no one creates counterfeiting at such a sophisticated level. Even if they do it, since we know who was the originator of that source of information, if it is not the official company which were trying to implement the trademark aspirin drugs, all right, we will know that this has come from some other XYZ company. All right, then all right, Sakshi has a question. How does a block recognize itself in the blockchain approach? So when I was saying these ledgers, all right, so blockchain is a chain of blocks, obviously. So every X seconds or X minutes, a new block is committed to any of the blockchain networks. What do these blocks contain? These blocks contain blobs of information. If we talk about the Ethereum network in general, Ethereum network, every 15 seconds, 1,000 or 2,000 different transactions are executed every 15 seconds. And those 15 seconds and those 1,000, 2,000 transactions are accommodated in a block. All right. So that is what a block means in a blockchain approach. And these blocks are connected to each other in a if you guys know about linked list, in a reverse linked list manner, in a reverse linked list fashion, these transactions have been first of all packed and they have been accommodated in a blockchain network. All right. Hope I was able to answer your question, Sakshi. Next question. All right. What are the opportunities in blockchain for mechanical engineering? Since mostly my scope of information is mostly based on the coding part, all right, so I'll talk at a broader industry level. So mechanical engineering, if the drug counterfeiting example that I talked about, that is being covered by the chemical engineering industry, because pharmacies and everything, they are broadly chemical engineering related. So if we talk about any mechanical engineering industry where data is critical, let's say there is a new automobile that has been patented, all right, a new automobile registration system, or maybe a new patent registration system for any new automobile that has been designed. People tend to, in order to get directly in the market, again similar to the drug counterfeiting industry, they skip those trials, and because of that, inferior automobile parts and inferior specs and designs, they go out in the market because of that fake fraudulent paper trail, and that is how accidents happen. All right, so in the automobile industry, if there is anything which is data critical, that finds its direct blockchain implementation. Next question please, Rishabh. There's a lot of other questions
How
I can
many
see.
more questions we can raise? Yeah. How many?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of other questions. I'll just keep on looking at them. Can I start blockchain development with Java, Bitcoin, or Ether, or any other? Yes, you can do that, EDM. The thing is, the community is very, very active in JavaScript and Python. In Java, not so much. All right, because Java is mostly a legacy-based implementation. But yes, there it is theoretically possible. But if you are a coder, you know how important it is for the community. Or if we talk about Stack Overflow, how important Stack Overflow is when you're starting your career as a coder in any of the industries. Obviously, there is a huge community involved. We at Zubi also, we are trying to raise a community. We will be discussing about that shortly. So we have also created a forum wherein people can ask these kinds of questions. So yes, if you are facing any coding level difficulties with respect to Java, you have to depend on the Java community. There's a much broader community for JavaScript and Python, although. That is what I would like to say. So if you are doing anything cutting edge, all right, you want to be up to speed with the entire market, Java is not really scaling to those heights when it comes to blockchain implementations. Yes, they have had an implementation, but it's easier doing the same in JavaScript and Python. Next question. Eklavya Verma, main challenge with blockchain is a lack of awareness of the technology, especially in sectors other than banking, and a widespread lack of understanding. How can we overcome that? That is our responsibility as the future generation of employees and entrepreneurs. It's our responsibility that we make the industry more mature and more aware about any cutting edge technology. If we talk about AI or machine learning, they have been here for the last 20-25 years. All right, and even after that, AI does not find any mainstream implementations in any day-to-day activity. Only certain implementation like chatbot, or maybe someone came up with a fancy droid, all right, something like that, but no mainstream implementations of AI have still been possible. That is our responsibility as the community and the future generation to make it more widespread, and that is why we are taking this session. We are talking about blockchain. So what is more important is understanding what blockchain tries to solve. I tried to discuss some of those aspects. You can figure out some other aspects as well, because now you know what blockchain is. If you know more about the blockchain architecture, you will understand how it solves some other real world problems. All right, and only then can adoption actually happen. Next question. What are some problems or challenges for a blockchain network as of now from your point of view? The first question, Eklavya already mentioned, there's not enough awareness in the system. If we talk about any of the laymen, people know at least what artificial intelligence is at a very basic level. If we talk about artificial intelligence, some people will say robots, all right? that is true to some extent when it comes to the emerging technology, that is artificial intelligence. The same, however, is not applicable for blockchain, because in blockchain, even today, if we talk about blockchain, people think that blockchain and cryptocurrencies are one and the same thing. That's not the case. Bitcoin is not a blockchain. All right, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency which utilizes the blockchain architecture in order to implement a cryptocurrency. All right, so that is the first problem. There's not enough awareness in the industry about blockchain. Secondly, people are still trying to figure out how to actually scale these solutions, because real world implementations require people to actually move from their legacy implementations to the new technology stack. All right, so we already know how difficult it is for people to even shift from PHP to any of the newer technology stack, let alone shifting their database management system entirely to a new technology. All right, so that is one another reason. Adoptability is very, very far-fetched right now. So there's a lot of cutting edge startups. What they are trying to do, they are trying to create a middle ground, a hybrid approach, wherein half of your data is centralized, half of your data is decentralized, and we are able to actually phase into the system slowly and steadily. That is how we are trying to get into the system. One very big problem, however, is the scalability solutions. Most of the popular blockchain networks of the world, if we talk about Bitcoin, one block, which is around 1,000 transactions, takes around 10 minutes. So if we talk about Visa transactions, that is just not possible at the moment, because Visa claims that they have 50,000 transactions per second. All right, so such a high latency, network latency, that is still not possible in a lot of blockchain networks. A lot of blockchain networks actually claim that they are able to do it, but it has not been benchmarked yet. And a lot of blockchain networks are coming which are trying to bring in the scalability solution. That is one thing. All right, so these are some of the problems and challenges. Obviously, there's not enough community, so you don't find a lot of blockchain coders in the world. So because of that, there's not enough blockchain solutions in the world, because there's not enough coders. So it's our responsibility again that we educate the next generation, the people like us. We understand blockchain, we educate the other people, so they are also able to equip themselves. So that is also something that we are trying to build at Zubi. Coming to the next question: how are transactions and blocks encrypted in the Bitcoin implementation? So there's this hashing algorithm called SHA-256. It is it's so secure that it has been claimed by the US defense that SHA-256 is the most secure encryption algorithm that exists on this planet. All right, so that is the level of encryption that is done in any of the direct blockchain implementations. That actually makes it a little more secure, obviously, but it makes being able to index data, being able to collect data, something that is very important when we talk about data analytics and everything, that becomes really difficult. So obviously there's a trade-off between the level of encryption you want in a blockchain technology and the level of speed you want in that blockchain technology to be able to fetch information. All right, so blocks are encrypted through an SHA algorithm. So SHA algorithm essentially makes it a one-way encryption, an asymmetric encryption. That means you will not be able to fetch the source of information back from the hash that is generated. This is something which has found its mainstream implementations in most of cloud computing. If you know about RSA keys, they are also SHA encrypt. They are also asymmetrically encrypted keys, which enable you to connect to your server in a much more decentralized manner without depending on logging in through email IDs and passwords in any of the AWS or DigitalOcean or any of the cloud computings that you know about. Next. Which is preferred more, JavaScript or Python? That totally depends on your level of understanding of, so that's totally a subjective thing. I am myself a JavaScript developer, so I have a little bias towards JavaScript, but there's a lot of Python developers who would argue that it is easy being able to create a decentralized data analytical blockchain solution using Python, because Python has those tools. All right, JavaScript has a much wider user base. Why? Because JavaScript runs on the browser, makes it possible to run your programs on the browser, and that is how without being able to connect to any centralized server, you will be able to access your blockchain information using your decentralized identity. All right, that is still very nascent when it comes to decentralized client-side scripting languages like React or Vue or Ember or Angular, if you talk about them, they are all built on top of JavaScript. There's not enough frameworks that have been built on top of Python when it comes to building client-side frameworks. All right, and that's why JavaScript is more preferred by the community also in general. But yes, Python also finds equal weightage. Next question. The future scope of blockchain, I guess I answered that question already, Vasu. So there's a lot of jobs. If you're talking about the jobs level, a lot of implementations are a lot of new titles and job roles are coming in the market every new day, every coming day. Especially after the cryptocurrency ban has been lifted, a lot of blockchain developer roles have opened up in our country as well. So that is when you talk about jobs at a broader level. If you talk about the industries at a broader level, there's still certain level of implementation POCs that needs to be done. Maybe in the next 5 years, the industry will be smart enough to be able to implement a full-fledged blockchain implementation. So that is the future scope. In the next 5 years, definitely it will be mainstream. Next question. UPI blockchain. Yes. So just read about Vajra by the NPCI. They are trying to create micro payment interfaces using blockchain.